To better understand human nature and America, I recommend spending a morning drinking 2.5 cups of coffee or consuming 370 milligrams of caffeine, and spend the morning reading Friedrich Nietzsche, George Orwell, and Kurt Vonnegut. Spend a little bit of time in between playing simple lines of Frank Zappa on the piano, and then reading a little bit about Walt Whitman. I'm going to go through a little chapter from Will Durant's The Greatest Minds and Ideas of All Time. He has a bit here on Walt Whitman, who he lists as number 10 in the greatest poets. Now, this book, as Will Durant admits, is an impossible task to rank order, the greatest books of all time or the greatest poets or writers or anything of all time. It is a impossible task, but nevertheless, I'm going to go through this as we think about human nature and understand a little bit more about American culture and what it's based upon. At the end of this, I think I will talk a little bit about how I first learned about Walt Whitman. Well, I was in Iceland, so let's go through with this. Come, Muse, migrate from Greece and Ionia. Cross out, please, those immensely overpaid accounts. That matter of Troy and Achilles' wrath, and Aeneas and Odysseus' wanderings. Placard removed, and to let on the rocks of your snowy Parnassus. Repeat at Jerusalem. Place the notice high on Jaffa's gate and on Mount Moriah. The same on the walls of your Gothic European cathedrals and German, French, and Spanish castles. For know a better, fresher, busier sphere, a wide, untried domain, demands you. I heard that you asked for something to prove this puzzle, the New World, and to define America, her athletic democracy. Therefore I send you my poems that you behold. In them what you wanted. It was a great revolution in the history of literature when a man appeared who saw the elements of poetry, the scenes of the human drama in the very life about him, who found a way to put into song the spirit of the pioneer, and who saw that there was more poetry out under the stars than in all the salons of an unnatural life. Almost for the first time, a poet was to find themes worthy of noble verse in the lives of common men. He would lift the people up into literature and to be a declaration of independence and the rights of man in poetry. He would incarnate not some dead ideal of Arthur or some forgotten myth of forgotten gods, but his own rough country, his own dubious democracy, his own turbulent and growing time. What Homer had been to Greece, Virgil to Rome, Dante to Italy, Shakespeare to England even, he was to be for America because he dared to see in her, with all her faults, underline that, her material of song. He made for her a new life. He made for her new life a new form of verse, as loose and irregular, as flowing and strong as himself. And so truly did he see and sing that at last became not only the poet of democracy in America, but by the greatness of his soul and the universality of his vision, the poet of the modern world. The originality of Leaves of Grass, says a French critic, is perhaps the most absolute which has ever been manifest in literature. Originality first in words. Here are no delicate nuances of language, no Shelleyan cloudiness of metaphysical speech, but masculine adjectives and nouns, plain blunt words, daringly raised from the streets and the fields to poetry. I had great trouble in leaving out the stock poetical touches, but succeeded at last. And then originality of form. No rhymes except on occasional failures like captain, my captain, rhyming one word with the same word. And no regular meter or rhyme, but only such free and varying rhythms as breathing might show, or the wind, or the sea, as above, so below. Originality of matter, the simple approach of an admiring child to the old and unhackneyed wonders of nature, the noiseless splash of the sunrise, the mad pushes of waves upon the land, the vivid identification of himself with every soul in every experience. My voice is the wife's voice, the screech by the rail of the stairs, they fetch my man's body up, dripping and drowned. The brave sincerity of an open mind, rejecting and loving all creeds, the frank and lusty sense of the flesh, the tang and fragrance of the open road, the defense and understanding of women, the old face of the mother of many children. Whist, I am fully content. Behold, a woman. She looks out from her Quaker cap. Her face is clearer and more beautiful than the sky. She sits in an armchair under the shaded porch of the farmhouse. The sun just shines on her old white head. Her ample gown is of cream-hued linen. Her grandsons raised the flax, and her granddaughters spun it with the distaff and the wheel. The melodious character of the earth, the finish beyond which philosophy cannot go and does not wish to go, the justified mother of men, the profound synthesis of individualism and democracy, and cosmic sweep of his imagination and sympathy, accepting all peoples and saluting the world. These were vivifying shocks to all traditions, all prejudices, all spirits caught in ancient grooves and molds, and the very protests they aroused proved their power and their necessity. All America denounced him except one man, who redeemed them with a letter that is the seal of his nobility. On July 21st, 1855, Emerson wrote to Whitman. Dear Sir, I am not blind to the wrath of the wonderful gift of Leaves of Grass. I find it the most extraordinary piece of wit and wisdom America has yet contributed. I am very happy in reading it, as great power makes us happy. I give you joy of your free and brave thought. I greet you at the beginning of a great career, which yet must have had a long foreground somewhere for such a start. I rub my eyes a little to see if this sunbeam were no illusion, for the solid sense of the book is a sober certainty. I wish to see my benefactor, and have felt very much like striking my tasks and visiting New York to pay you my respects. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Whitman is gone, but how lately! He lived when we were children, even in our time. Then there can be giants, and even America, so crass and young, can produce a poet unique and among the best. Some months ago I stood in his Camden home, where paralysis kept him an invalid for many years, and I mourned to see about me all these reminders that genius too must die. But then I took up his book and read once more the lines that have always haunted me, lines that are here left as the lines that are here left as the parting word, to haunt other memories endlessly. I depart as air, shaking my white locks at the runaway sun. I effuse my flesh in eddies, and drift in a lacy and drift it in lacy jags. O Walt Whitman, I bequeath myself to the dirt, to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. You will hardly know who I am, or what I mean. But I shall be good health to you nevertheless, and filter and fibre your blood. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me at one place, search another. I stop somewhere, waiting for you. The 100 Best Books for Education. Okay, I will stop there, but might I add that Will Durant, I think, was one of the greatest American historians, and he wrote much on the history of all of humanity. And this book here is a really short and accessible book of his, but certainly it is simply a reference to all the other great things to educate yourself upon. Now, Will Durant wrote the story or the history, the story of civilization, as you can see italicized there. And it doesn't say here, 11 volume, Story of Civilization. So they stack up, or widthwise, for like an entire bookshelf length size. And it's a tremendous amount of stuff to read. And I have all 11 copies with extras of some that I've found at thrift stores and whatnot. And only one have I fully read, and that is the Renaissance volume, which is quite interesting and goes through the Renaissance period of history. And so Will Durant, a great person to learn from and to learn history, and Walt Whitman, yes, Walt Whitman. And of course, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the transcendentalist, great American writer to have come before him as well. I first learned about Walt Whitman from the American writer and poet Bill Holm, American Icelander. This is the most accessible book that I had of his to grab here, Coming Home Crazy, which is essays about his time spent living in China. And there's old Bill Holm in the tiny little corner of this. And I got to live in his house called Brimness, which is his summer house mainly, where he would live when he was in Iceland. He is, like myself, has Icelandic ancestry, but for him it was from both sides of his mother and father. And he was a writer who has passed away. I always forget his exact death date, which certainly doesn't matter, although he's been gone for more than a decade. And I got this weird sort of mentorship from him because I was living in his house and had access not only to the books and poems that he himself wrote, but access to his entire library, which had some of the authors that I mentioned earlier, but also like Walt Whitman and many other American poets and Chinese poets. Right? Again, he spent time living in China, and I'm looking actually here. I have a book here on Madagascar, and Bill Holm had traveled to Madagascar too, and wrote a book called Eccentric Islands, which talks about his travels to Madagascar, his time in Iceland, and other islands, imaginary or physical, where he spent time in. And so my point with all of this is there was a great poster on the wall in the kitchen in Brimness where I would cook lamb and hard-boiled eggs and other Icelandic foods. And it was Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. It was a poster of the cover of that book. And so Leaves of Grass, I think there was a couple copies on his bookshelves, and I would pick up this book and read random bits of it, and I would get in this weird, heady space of just kind of like strange, almost like I'd just taken a drug. And so when I make this video and I read bits about Walt Whitman, and I suggest that to understand America, you should read Walt Whitman, I do mean that in a literal sense, but also in this weird metaphysical sense. I do not think I understand American culture. I don't think I understand Canadian culture. I don't think I understand human culture, right? This is grand and vast, and someone like Will Durant spent his entire life writing and studying history and philosophy. And I don't know if when he passed away, Will Durant, in 1981 in California, I don't know if he understood all aspects of human existence, right? That's maybe definitely an impossible task. And so I say all of this just as a reflection of how one can go about educating themselves. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of reading, perhaps a lot of caffeine, some interludes playing the piano, talking to yourself on a camera, and accessing and reading as widely as possible as you can. And so that is my message to myself and to all of you. And I hope it makes a little bit of sense, but more likely than not, it'll make absolutely no sense at all. But nonetheless, here's a new YouTube video, so I hope you enjoy.